Welcome everyone to VMblog's 2022 Mega Series, and today we're fortunate to be joined by Denny LeCompte, the CEO of Portnox. Thanks for joining us today, Denny.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Glad to be here.
So just to get things going, why don't you provide a quick background on the company and talk about where things are headed into 2023?
Sure. Portnox is a zero trust access control company. We focus on network devices, on IoT. We solve problems for bring your own device scenarios, remote workers, and there's a lot of folks that have been doing this for a long time. Cisco, HP, they have a lot of what we think of as legacy products. They're very much on-prem. They're appliances or virtual appliances, but that you have to deploy, you have to manage. And frankly, a lot of them can be very burdensome for a network engineer. So we kind of do the same thing, but we have a SaaS-based version of that so that you can take away all of that overhead. And it's all based on a very standard protocol, 802.1x, so that pretty much every network device you can find, every endpoint device supports 802.1x. So we pretty much support everything out of the box. That combination of SaaS plus a standard protocol means that when you're trying to do network access control, the product just is really, really simple. That's the biggest value that most customers get, is that this is a thing that provides a ton of security. And if you could do it without a lot of overhead, that's a revelation for many network engineers.
Now, what would you say are some of the specific problems that are solved by Portnox?
We like to think of what we do as just a essential security. It is not a product that we're going to solve one problem. Like, hey, we address ransomware and we'll deal with that. One of the things we've observed is, we focus on mid-sized companies, not SMB, not the very largest enterprise, but that huge number of companies with, let's say, 500 to 10, 20,000 employees. And those guys have all kinds of problems. So what we do is network access control, and zero trust security in general is just trying to control who can get to your assets. So that really solves kind of a broad array of security problems, so that the metaphor we always use is like a bouncer at the gate, so that if you're trying to get into the party or into the building, our product stands there and, are you on the list? Do I know who you are? If you are, then the other thing we do is kind of a security posture check. So before we let a device onto the network, we look to see, is it meeting a broad array of security policies? Or is your endpoint protection running? Do you have the right ports open and closed? All those things, because if none of those are true, we allow our users to set a policy that will say, oh, let them on, but put them into the guest network, or block them completely, whatever it is you want. And we can also then drop you into the appropriate VLAN based on, now that we know who you are, you kind of passed through security. If back to the party metaphor, we can decide that you are allowed, but you can only go in this room. And that room's cool, but you can't get in the really cool room because you just don't qualify. And so that's kind of it. And because of that, it will solve a lot of security problems. It'll prevent, if somebody does, let's say they just they're trying to do an account takeover. They've found your username and password on the dark web, in one of those big goodie baskets of credentials. Well, they can have it, but if they're using a device to get onto the network that is unknown, it won't let you on. So in terms of what it protects from, it's not everything, but it's an awful lot. So when we talk to mid-market companies, what we're really focusing on is kind of bang for the buck. Like you can't deploy, 50 different security products. You don't have the budget. You don't have the IT staff to do that. So you should do the important things. You should have a firewall. You should have endpoint protection. But you should also have kind of zero trust access control just to make sure that you're denying by default and that you're only letting the right things on.
Now, what would you say are 2 or 3 things that make the Portnox Cloud unique?
One of them is the fact that it's cloud. You're just not going to find things that claim to do network access control. They're all on-prem, and so that they're on-prem. They're really just a lot more work. And because this is authentication, you have to do a lot of updates. Every time network vendor makes a change, like a lot of these legacy vendors, you have to do an update to maintain compatibility. We don't have that problem because we're standards based, but they have it, and you can't make that change in the middle of production because if authentication goes bad, like everybody can't get on the network. That's a good way for an IT pro to get in trouble. So that's nights and weekends. That's kind of one of the things we hear the most. But because it's cloud based, let's say something like the log4j vulnerability comes out. If you were like a Cisco customer, you had a lot of updates to do. You had to do kind of 6 different updates before that was all patched. But if you had been a Portnox customer, like it's not your problem, right? Because it's a SaaS offering, you don't need to think about that at all. So usability is a big piece of it. The other one is IoT. Like you talk to security people, and they'll tell you one of the things they worry about a lot is Internet of Things kind of devices. And that's just because those devices are not really built to be very secure. So they are often a big vulnerability. And so we have introduced some functionality around IoT devices where we can fingerprint them. So you can, let them on the network. And then they all kind of look the same because they're headless devices. So we can figure out what kind of device it is, and then you can set policies based on that. So that you can say, well, look, only HP printers of this model can get on. And with a very high accuracy, we can figure out, well, that's an HP printer, that's a camera, this is a TV, all those things that are all over the place. And one of the things we hear from more and more customers is that IoT devices are proliferating. So there's a lot of solutions out there that are claiming to be zero trust, but many of them are very focused on just applications. Like, hey, I'll make sure a user can only get to a particular application, but they're not doing the posture assessment on the devices. But then they're also just overlooking IoT devices in general. So we find that we're selling a lot based on a high level of functionality, solving those problems, and then a lot of simplicity.
Talking about Portnox Cloud, is there a way for people to get a trial and maybe try it out before they purchase the product?
Absolutely. It's a really, really simple product, and we offer a 30-day trial. You can sign up for it and get going on your own. If you want to talk to like a sales engineer and get a demo and answer questions, you could do either of those. One of the things to be honest, the biggest thing we have to do is convince people this really works, because especially people who've worked with this kind of technology, they expect it to be hard, and they're like, well, how are you doing it in the cloud? So sometimes they just want to talk to another technical person who can kind of explain to them, like, look, it's not magic. We're just, you've got a radius server and, some security enforcement mechanisms, and it's actually not that mysterious.
Now, you talked pretty in depth about the what makes Portnox Cloud unique. Thinking about your differentiation from competitors, why is it? What do you think are the things that make other companies, your customers, choose Portnox? Where do you win against the competition?
The things we see the most, one is there's like often a mandate somewhere in the IT organization, whether it's a CIO or whoever has said, you need to move everything to the cloud that can move to the cloud. And so they're just looking around at all of their solutions, and they are trying to get them out of the data center and into the cloud. And so when they do that, they'll often, find us as the, network access control cloud, and we're about the only thing we're aware of that does it in the cloud. So that's the most common. People are looking for that. The other case, and it's related, but a big driver is especially distributed companies that you have a lot of locations, and that's where having appliances becomes more and more of a burden. Because if you're all in one place, okay, I can handle that. But if you're like a hub and spoke system where you've got locations, it's 20, 30, 40 locations, or let's say we have a customer who's a large hotel chain. Well, each hotel has devices, but not a lot of devices. And so having to deploy access control boxes at every location, they're like, that's not going to work. We can't possibly do that. So for them, having it cloud-based becomes really, really impactful, because then you can manage that centrally and get the security benefit in all these little locations. And that's surprisingly, that distributed nature is becoming really common, in the marketplace today.
Now, there's a lot of companies that claim to be zero trust. How does Portnox fit into that zero trust model?
Yeah, zero trust is one of those where the marketing teams everywhere have gotten hold of it, and it's everywhere, and so it means almost nothing if you're not careful. The way we think about it, zero trust is fundamentally you want to deny access by default, right? If you were going to rename it, deny by default wouldn't be a bad name for it. So we implement zero trust. There are different aspects to it, where you think about what are the digital assets that I'm talking about: my network, my wireless, wired data, IoT, all of those things, where we have products that our product will by default deny access and then apply those policies. So if you are kind of on the journey to zero trust, then we can really help you by really limiting who can get to what. One of the things that we don't do, that some of the vendors seem to do, is they're saying, look, we can help you with zero trust, but what they're really expecting you to do is a massive overhaul of how your network is configured. And look, if you're up for that, that's great. But again, getting back to these mid-market customers, they're too big for change to be easy, but they are too small to have giant teams to make big changes. So the promise we have for them is that if you use us, we can provide this, deny by default kind of approach to all of your digital assets, but you're not going to have to change the way people work. You're not going to have to reconfigure your network. So we usually get people deployed. We give them a little bit of instruction on how to do one or two devices, and then they do the rest themselves. You don't have a professional services team, because it's just, frankly, it's not that hard, right? You're touching networking equipment. We all know if you do that, that's never trivial, because you have to be careful that you don't mess everything up. But once you connect everything to the switches, if you're using certificates for authentication, you got to set that up. But then once you do that, it kind of just runs itself. And what I would say is we are different from a lot of zero trust vendors where they're making big promises, but there's a heavy lift. And in my career, where I've been most successful with products is where they're providing a lot of value, but they're not a lot of lift. Sometimes that's worth it, but it's not for everything, and it's not for everybody.
So, Denny, this has been great information. I appreciate that. I'm a visual guy. Is there any way we can see a demo and that see what it looks like for ourselves?
Absolutely. What you're going to see next is a short demo that kind of goes over just the high points of the product and what it can do. And if you're interested, after seeing that, we can get you a personal demo if you come to portnox.com so that you can get all the specifics of your situation answered.
Hello, and welcome to Portnox Clear's Easy Wi-Fi Security Setup. To sign up, simply enter your personal details and your organization name under which your Clear account will be created. Clear will automatically send you an activation email with a link to activate your subscription. Once you activate it, you can log in. Simply accept the terms and conditions and you're in. The next step is to set up your own organization's Radius tenant. Simply go to Settings and click on Clear Radius Service. Select the region that is closest to you. In this case, we chose the US and North America, but you can choose the region that is closest to you. Now you will see the Radius details that have been created for you, such as IP address, accounting port, authentication port, and so forth. Now let's just enter these Radius details that Clear provided into your wireless controller. In this specific SSID, we will select WPA2 Enterprise in order to individually authenticate your devices by using .1x industry standard. Enter your Radius details and apply them to all the access points. All you need to do here in Clear is to select the right authentication method for you. In this example, we're using certificate-based authentication. You can use your existing PKI or choose to work with the Clear Certificate Authority. No matter what you choose, you need to upload your root certificate authority into Clear. In this example, we're just using the Clear Certificate Authority. And that's it. Any device that's been enrolled with a trusted certificate can now automatically connect to the network. The EAP TLS message on the Clear portal is the indication that the endpoint was successfully connected to the network using certificate-based authentication. Thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy your secure Wi-Fi access powered by Portnox Clear.
Well, thanks for that great demo. Where can folks go if they want to find out more information about Portnox and some of the things you talked about today?
Well, you can find everything about the company at portnox.com, and that's Portnox, no K. So portnox.com, we have a lot of information, white papers. You can request a demo, a personal demo, or again, you can sign up for a trial. Like you should put your hands on it yourself so that you can see what the thing can do.
Well, great. Thanks for taking the time to be part of our mega series and talking with VMblog today.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you.